seeing all the 30th anniversary posts by fellow creators on Instagram and YouTube, TikTok, it really got me thinking that that probably is the most impactful year. It was the year I got my first CD player. It was the year that I started collecting music. And looking back on all the technology that was available for physical media, of course, CD was king in 1994, but cassette tape still had its place in the market. Even a mild vinyl resurgence started coming up in the mid-90s. Obviously not as big as the resurgence that has happened in the last 10 years currently, but we saw a lot of artists that put out some new release music on vinyl during that time. Minidisc was making an appearance. It was obviously a failed technology looking back on it now, especially here in the United States, but in Europe it was very big, and a lot of artists during that time released their music on minidisc. And so today I just wanted to go over the records, the albums, the cassettes, and the mini discs that were really impactful to me personally. And it's crazy looking back on all the albums that came out in that time that in the moment were big for me, whether they were music videos I saw on MTV, they were CDs that were passed around in my friend circle, and even music that I was discovering 10, 15 years later. I've even discovered songs and artists that I didn't even know existed until just now that put out albums in 1994. And so today we're gonna look at some of those albums. So first off is, and I'm gonna do these in chronological order. I'm not gonna make a top 10 because I don't think I could. I think if I did this again in 5 years, it would probably be completely different. But anyway, the first album we're going to start with is Alice in Chains, Jar of Flies. Now, obviously this album is a EP, it's not a full LP, but still, it was very impactful. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I still remember the first time I saw the music video for I Stay Away. I mean, just those puppets just creeped me out as a kid, but I absolutely love this song, and I honestly didn't get a chance to listen to the full EP probably about 15, 20 years ago, so about 10 years after the album came out. And I mean, this thing is just absolutely fantastic. This is actually the music on vinyl pressing, and I got a few more that we're going to run across here that are music on vinyl pressings. If you ever see a 90s album that you're thinking about getting and it has the music on vinyl sticker, this one I didn't save, but anyway, if you see that on there, I highly recommend getting it because every single album I've gotten that is pressed by music on vinyl from the 90s sounds absolutely fantastic. The next one is Green Day's Dookie. I got really into skateboarding in 1994, and so for me, this album, I would just listen to this on my boombox in my garage and try to skateboard. Me and my skating buddies love this CD. I don't have it anymore, mainly because it was basically destroyed. It was so scratched up towards the end of its life that I basically couldn't even play it anymore. But this vinyl reissue is great. Growing up here in Northern California in the 90s, I always joke with people that loving Sublime was basically a law. Now, this album is the one that really got me hooked on them. It was their next album that I'm sure everybody knows that's even pays mildly attention to Sublime's history. But this one I really didn't get into until probably about 15 years ago or so. One of my good friends, she's a huge Sublime fan, and when I met her around that time, she introduced me to a lot of the songs on this album, and if you ever listen to it in its entirety, it's a lot of fun. It's kind of just one of those things you have to listen to the whole thing to really appreciate it. Next one is going to be the first non-vinyl on the list here. Nine Inch Nails Downward Spiral. This is actually the deluxe edition Super Audio CD. So this is actually surround sound. I really love surround sound audio, and so this is an album that for me not that it improves it. I mean, 2-channel, you can't go wrong. But with the Nine Inch Nails album, and especially something like this, that the sonic quality is just through the roof, this is a lot of fun to listen to in surround sound audio. And then the next one is probably not is definitely one of the a band that's not as well known as a lot of the others that I've already covered, but that's Failure's Magnified album. This is another band that I honestly just discovered probably about 2-3 years ago, and they recently just started reissuing their catalog on vinyl. If you know you probably maybe know them from the song "Stuck on You," which is off their I believe it's their third album, this album is just as good. If you like, I think they call this kind of space rock. It's definitely on the grunge spectrum, but it's a really great album. I highly recommend going on their Bandcamp, checking them out. I believe they just went on a tour this year in 2024. I'm sure they'll go on more, but this is a band that I would definitely recommend checking out if you haven't heard of them. Next on the list, Soundgarden's Super Unknown. I don't have a vinyl pressing of this. This is actually my CD from when it came out. I don't think I got it in 94, probably around 95, maybe 96. But I love this CD. I still listen to it regularly. I'll eventually get the vinyl. But for now, I just have the CD, and I still like listening to my original CDs that I've had for the last 30 years. Next up is our first venture into the heavy metal, Pantera's Far Beyond Driven. I really discovered this band, of course through the song Walk, but really what got me into them was the cover of Black Sabbath's Planet Caravan. It's just an amazing cover. This whole album is great, but I mean, it really is a cherry on top with having that as the final song on this album. Next one is probably one of my most prized possessions, and that is Pink Floyd's The Division Bell. Now, I talked about at the beginning of the video that 94, and I believe into 95, maybe even into 96, there was a mild vinyl resurgence. And so artists were putting out their new albums on vinyl, and this is one of them. This is an original 1994 pressing. It's in transparent blue, so it looks great on my acrylic turntable. But a lot of people don't like the post-Waters era of Pink Floyd, but I'm a huge Gilmour guy, and so yeah, I mean, is it Wish You Were Here is a Dark Side of the Moon? No, but it's still an amazing, amazing album. Staying on the original pressings for 1994, this Offspring Smash album. This is another one that when I was skateboarding with my friends, this is another album that we listened to a lot. And this one's not as a good condition as my Division Bell pressing, but it's still really cool. I still really like getting these original 90s pressings of especially of this era. And I don't think there's really... I've seen Offspring, probably 3 times live, and they're honestly one of the best live acts I've ever seen. And so if you ever get a chance to, I highly recommend seeing them. Next up is our first cassette of the video, and that's Hole's Live Through This. Growing up in the grunge era, I mean, you couldn't avoid Hole. I really didn't appreciate their music, honestly, for the longest time. This cassette is just, I was at the record store one day and they had it for, I think it was like $1. And so I just figured I'd pick it up. And honestly, it's been one that I've been listening to a lot lately, just going through the list of all these great albums that came out in 94. And this has been one that's honestly been in regular rotation lately. Another band that's maybe not as well known, but I kind of feel lately is becoming a little bit more known. They just did an opening act for Deftones. show down in San Diego, and this album obviously is celebrating its 25th anniversary, and that's Sunny Day Real Estate's Diary. This is one probably has their most recognizable hit in circles, and it's a great album. I honestly just heard that one song on the radio, and it was just something that, maybe if it was on, I'd listen to it, and if I wanted to pull it up on my phone, I'd listen to it. But then when they did this reissue of this album, I thought, you know what, I'm going to give the whole thing a try, and I'm definitely glad I did. It's a great album, and this is a great reissue. It sounds fantastic, and if you get a chance and you're even mildly interested in the band, I highly recommend getting this. Next up is one that I know I said at the beginning I wasn't going to do these as a top 10 list because I would probably change my mind in just a few years, if not a month. But this next one, I gotta say, I think it's the best album of 1994, and that is Weezer's Blue Album. I just think that this is a perfect album. Just start to finish, it's just fantastic. I mean, there's not a single song that I would skip. I put this album on when I'm feeling great, and I put this album on when I'm feeling sad, and it pairs well with both moods. I was lucky enough to see Weezer on their Voyage of a Blue Planet tour this year, where they played this album front to back, and in all honesty, it was definitely one of the best live shows I went to this year, but I gotta admit, it might be one of the best shows I've ever been to, period. And so I don't really know much more that needs to be said about this album. In the comments below, please let me know what you think your favorite album is of 1994. I have quite a few more in this. We're probably only about halfway through. And so, like I said, maybe the next one I might change my mind. We'll find out. Next up is our first mini disc of the list, and that's Toad the Wet Sprocket. This album is really great. I don't know how many people have actually seen mini disc, but this is basically what it looks like. It almost looks like a cassette case, really. Anyway, there. Mini disc, I'll just do a brief little thing about it for a lot of people don't know. It was really kind of supposed to be a replacement for portable audio. The first mini disc player, it is pretty bulky if you look it up, but the ones that came out just a year or two after, they were really small. And so this is just a way to, have music on the go. You can once again see, you could actually just carry them just like this. You don't even really need the case. A lot of times when you look up these, it's actually hard to find them with the case, because a lot of times when people were buying these, they were getting rid of the case and just keeping the disc itself. But I like collecting them, and I don't recommend doing it because it's if you think vinyl is a money pit of a hobby, mini disc is even more so. But there's a few in my collection, and this album is a lot of fun to listen to. Next is going back to the Weezer. This one is probably more sentimental of a pick than anything else, but it's still an album that I absolutely love. I still have the CD. It is Stone Temple Pilots Purple. The case is in really bad, scratched up condition, but the CD is actually still in pretty good shape. I did get the vinyl reissue that came out, I believe, about 5 years ago. And so honestly, I listened to both versions quite a bit because it's a great album. I remember one of my summertime friends that I would hang out with, his older brother had this CD, and I knew it had the song. I didn't know the title of it. I just knew it had the song from the trailer for The Crow. And I almost thought about, speaking of The Crow, I almost thought about putting that on this list, the soundtrack, but I thought I'd just keep it just to studio albums. Anyway, this he brought the CD in, and I'll show it to you. This is all I knew it looked like. I knew it was Stone Temple Pilots, but that's all I knew. And so when I finally saved up money to buy the CD myself, and I went down to my local record store, I had no idea what the case looked like. And so all I had to go off of was that I saw I saw the cover and I saw how similar the scales were. And so I just hoped that this was the right CD. And I remember getting home and taking off the wrapping and being so relieved to find out that I had gotten the right one. Next up is going to be the first classic rock of the list, and that's Stone Temple Pilots' Voodoo Lounge. At the time, this wasn't the case, but just a few years later and up until today, the Rolling Stones are my favorite band. And this is a great album. You know, obviously it's not their 60s, 70s, or even early 80s stuff, but it's still a great album. I mean, I still remember seeing the video for Love Is Strong on MTV and knowing of the Rolling Stones, but never hearing any of their music. And I was just blown away by that song. And I didn't get around to buying the full album or even listening to the full album until much later in life. But it really does have a lot of great songs. And I want to know where it ranks in your list of Rolling Stones albums. I mean, obviously it's maybe not even in their top 10, but it's still an amazing album. Next up, Sponge, Rotten Pinata. On the radio, I remember hearing Plowed and Molly all the time, but I never got around to listening to this full album. I just knew that I loved Plowed, like a lot of people who grew up in the 90s listening to the radio. But I remember seeing this at the record store. It's also a music on vinyl pressing, and I just thought, you know what? I've always wanted to listen to the whole thing. It was at a good price. I knew music on vinyl, it'd sound great. And so I probably listened to it about 10 times in the first week that I had it. It's a really, really good album, start to finish. So if you're a fan of either of those songs, but you've never given this album a listen, I'd highly recommend it. Next up is another one that probably a lot of people think this is the best album of 1994. And especially since they're in a lot of people's minds because they just announced a reunion tour, and it's another mini disc, and that's Oasis, Definitely Maybe. I am a huge Oasis fan. It's funny, I actually started getting really back into them at the beginning of this year, and then they announced they were doing a reunion tour. This isn't the one, honestly, that got me into them. It was, What's the Story, Morning Glory, their next album, that really did it for me. Now, of course, this has a lot of my favorite songs. I mean, obviously, look, Live Forever, Supersonic, Slide Away, but, there's a lot of great songs on this besides just the hits. I love Rock and Roll Star. I love Married with Children. And so, like I said, there's another mini disc, and I really do love having this in the collection because I really feel like Oasis, mini disc, those are two things that are just very, very mid-90s. Next up is another album and band that honestly I didn't discover until just a few years ago, and that's Corrosion of Conformity. Albatross is their big, hit off this album and probably the biggest hit of the band. I didn't really discover them until just a few years ago. I honestly thought they were kind of a newer band. And so this is another one that I had a chance to get probably about a year ago. And I thought, well, I really like that one song. I kind of am that way. If I like a song, rather than just streaming the album, I kind of like to just give the vinyl a try. And then this album is great start to finish. If it's very 1994 sound, it's got a little bit more blues to it. I might want to compare it maybe closer to like a harder Mad Season kind of sound. So anyway, I think it's a great one. And if you heard the song Albatross, you'll like the rest of this album. So I definitely recommend it. Now we're going to go another heavy metal album. This is a band that honestly, I probably about 3 years ago, I took a really deep dive into like 80s, 90s thrash and doom metal. And so you think thrash metal, you think Slayer. And Divine Intervention has honestly become one of my favorites. I know a lot of people, kind of like with Metallica, they just want to point to the 80s stuff. But this, because I just wanted a complete my Slayer collection. I got this. I thought, hey, this will be fun to have in the collection. Maybe I'll give it a spin from time to time. I got this with a pretty big haul all at once. And just by chance, I decided to throw this one on. I ended up listening to it 3 times in one day. I know a lot of Slayer fans might not agree with me, but I honestly think this is one of their best. This might be in my top 3 of their albums. We're going to go back into the alternative pool with REM's Monster. Probably about 10, 12 years ago, I went on a really big REM kick. Of course, growing up in the 90s, I listened to a lot of REM, never owned a CD, never really went out of my way to listen to them. But when I took kind of this dive about 10, 12 years back, this was really the album I listened to the most. And and a few years ago, they released this, you can see the 25th anniversary pressing of this that obviously came out 5 years ago. It really is the album I listen to by them the most. And so I'm not going to say it's their best album. I'm not going to go that far just because I haven't really gone through their discography as much as maybe other people, especially big REM fans. I know a lot of people maybe think Automatic of the People, but I really think Monster might be their best album. Next up is staying with the alternative, Cranberries. No need to argue. It starts off with Ode to My Family, which I think is probably one of the Cranberries' best songs. Of course, it has Zombie on it, their big hit, especially the big hit off this CD. But Ode to My Family, I mean, every time I listen to it, and especially to kick off this album, it's just great. Going back into metal, Danzig 4. I don't really know. I guess I'll hold it this way. It's a gatefold, so it usually sits this way. But anyway, another kick I went on a few years ago, Danzig, Misfits. I just, out of nowhere, just really wanted to listen to them constantly. And Sam Hain, obviously, of course, I don't want people yelling at me in the comments that I'm just thinking of Misfits and Danzig as far as his music goes. But this Danzig 4, another great album in his collection. You know, a lot of people go with his first or second. 4 is great. I actually just re-listened to this the other night, and it's just a great listen. If you're a Danzig fan, I highly recommend it. It's definitely not as heavy as the first 2 albums. But it's still Glenn Danzig. It's still that great voice. So if you don't have this one, or if you're just not familiar with it, I highly recommend listening to it. And this is another one that in the moment I didn't know they existed. It took me about another 4 years to discover them, and another 2-3 albums before they maybe became one of my favorite bands of the nu metal era, and really got me through some tough times in high school, or times I thought were tough but really weren't that bad. Korn's debut album. This one, to me, start to finish, I know probably the last song, Daddy, for a lot of people, it's a bit of a drag, and it is. And most times when I put this on the record player, when I get to that song, I usually just end it, end the record. And but it's just a fantastic album. It's another music on vinyl pressing, and just like with the other ones that I've shared, it sounds amazing. I'm really happy to have this pressing in the collection. And so if you're a nu metal fan at all, I'm sure this is on your list for 1994. I don't think it's their best album. I am a definitely follow the leader issues guy, but still, this is a great, great album. And I honestly didn't realize until probably about 10 years ago or so that this came out in 94. I thought their first couple albums came out around 95, 96. So to find out that this came out in 94 really blew my mind, because it was definitely nothing else that was going on at that time, especially in the mainstream. While I was doing research for all the albums that came out in 1994, I kind of started doing a deep dive into every album, or albums that I hadn't heard of, or bands that I hadn't heard of. And one that I came across is this band called the Nixons. This is their debut album, Halo. Obviously came out in 1994. I just heard one of their songs randomly while I was checking out songs and music of 1994, and I really liked it. The song was Sister, which I don't think was a single or anything because they were a pretty small band at the time. They're still touring, and I highly recommend checking them out. The way I'll describe them is they're very 1994 rock, and I mean that in the best way possible. Going back to classic rock, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, No Quarter. This is one I remember. It's a live album. I remember it being on VH1 MTV. I hadn't fully gotten into Led Zeppelin yet at the time. Right now, as of now, they're one of my top 5 favorite bands of all time. But this is them just singing old Led Zeppelin songs and putting kind of a different spin on it. A lot of the stuff's very experimental. If you love Led Zeppelin, you'll like this. But if you're a casual Led Zeppelin fan, this might not be for you. But still, it's Jimmy Page, it's Robert Plant playing together live. You'll have a good time. The next one is another one that, for a lot of people might be the best release of 1994. And it's another one I still have the original CD because I loved it so much. And that is Nirvana's Unplugged in New York. I loved this CD. I listened to it over and over and over again, much like the Dookie CD, but this one actually survived. It actually still sounds pretty damn good. But if it doesn't, I, of course, got the reissue that I think this came out about 3 or 4 years ago. But anyway, it's a great album. I still vividly remember I wanted to do the cover of David Bowie's Man Who Sold the World at my 4th grade talent show, but I was told it's not an approved song. I probably wouldn't have done a very good job, and I'm sure none of my classmates would have known the song at all, but I loved it. I still love that song. I love this entire album. I'm a huge Nirvana fan, and this was the first Nirvana CD I ever had. Next up, Tom Petty, Wildflowers. You Don't Know How It Feels is probably one of my favorite songs of his. And yes, I am including all of his stuff with the Heartbreakers. The single off, the title track off this, Wildflowers, beautiful, beautiful song. I know some people, they either like his stuff with the Heartbreakers and they're not really a fan of his stuff, sans Heartbreakers. But to say this isn't a great album is just a mistake, because it's a great listen start to finish. I re-listened to it, I think last weekend, and it still sounds great. It holds up, I guess. Next up is another one that I saw, a live album that was on MTV. Actually, I think it's more on VH1. But it's Eagles, Hell Freezes Over. Definitely one that at the time, I remember seeing it, appreciating it, but it not being my sound at the time. I was knee-deep in the music that a lot of we just went through. And so the Eagles at the time weren't really my favorite. Now they're, as I've grown older, they're one of my favorite bands. And this is actually a DTS CD, so it's also surround sound, just like I was talking about with the 9 Inch Nails CD. So it's really great. I might do a video in the future about surround sound audio, Blu-ray audio. If you ever get a chance and you have a surround sound system, live albums in surround sound are really great because it sounds like you're really just sitting in the crowd or even right in front of the stage. And with this one, it's no different. Next up, Pearl Jam, Vitology. This was the first album that they did where they didn't have a music video for it. And so for me, that's how I really got into music. New songs, new bands was MTV. I really didn't listen to the radio a lot during that time. I probably heard a few of the songs off this album in the moment. Of course, I saw this CD at the record store and I knew it was Pearl Jam, but it kind of had a mystique to it because I didn't know any of the songs, and so I didn't want to spend, what little allowance money I had on a CD that I had no idea what was on it. Obviously, this is, for some people, this is their best album, maybe even better than 10. I'm more of a 10 guy, but still, this album is fantastic. And once again, probably for a lot of people watching this might be their favorite album of 1994. going back to Oasis, I went on kind of a Brit pop, Brit rock. I know Oasis doesn't like being called Brit pop, but I went on that kind of tangent earlier in the year. Another band that, of course, popped up that's alongside them, not Blur, but the Stone Roses. I don't have the album from that year. This is just their greatest hits, but it has most of the songs that are, they only put out, I believe, 2 albums anyway. So most of the songs that are off that album are on this. But either way, if you like Oasis, I'm pretty confident you like the Stone Roses. So if you haven't heard them or you've only heard a few of their songs, I highly recommend checking out them however you listen to music. And then last on the list, but as they say, certainly not least, Bush, 16 Stone. CD that I had in 94, listen to this thing constantly, probably all the way up until 1996. This was like a regular spin for me. It was funny because my girlfriend in 1996, she was a huge No Doubt fan. And so when Gavin Rossdale and Gwen Stefani started dating, we just loved listening to Tragic Kingdom and this CD all the time because we thought ourselves as that, as Gavin and Gwen. But much like them, we're no longer together. But still, this is just a perfect album, start to finish. They just did a re-release of this because the reason why I'm doing this last, that came out in December of 94. So this week or last week of this being recorded was the actual 30th anniversary. So I'll probably end up picking up the vinyl once I get a chance. But for now, I'm sticking with my 94. Well, that was 1994. For me, that's my most impactful year in music. Now, granted, there was a lot of other years in my lifetime that had just as much, if not better, music that was released. But for me personally, between the time it came out till 10, 15, now here we are 30 years later, it's still impacting me to this day. So I'd like to hear from all of you. What was your most impactful year for you personally? Was it 1995? Was it 2011? I'd really like to hear the reason why. Also, please go check out my Instagram page, which is also Vinyl Drinks. You'll see me spinning and, of course, having a drink. Of course, I had to go with this Hoppy Joy Joy Ren and Stimpy IPA because, I mean, what's more 1994 than Ren and Stimpy? Anyway, cheers and keep spinning.